you're from Nevada. When I think of Nevada, I just think of Las Vegas. Like, how do you end up doing sheepdogs in Nevada?
Well, there's a lot more cattle in Nevada than there are sheep,
Yeah,
for one thing, and it's a very desert environment. So any sheep that are around there, they're very drought tolerant.
yeah.
So it's all Merino, Rambouillet, those type breeds.
Is that like I hear people talking about hair sheep? Is that hair sheep?
No, it's like very fine wool.
Yeah. And I also hear people talking about wool blind. Is that something that happens with merinos?
Yes.
And is it just that the wool comes in around their eyes and?
Yeah, sometimes it even comes down on their muzzle, and when it grows out, I mean, they're like blind.
And how do you work, or can you work sheep like that?
You got to get your snippers out.
You got to give them a shave before you start. Yeah.
Yeah, they can't see. They crash into stuff.
Yeah.
They're no good at all.
Yeah. That sounds like hard work. And how did you get started, or what? How did you ever get hooked on sheepdogs?
Well, my mom, she was into dogs for a long time, so I kind of grew up with it.
Yeah.
And I grew up on a ranch where dogs were used for
Yeah.
real work on sheep and cattle.
And so when you grew up on the ranch, like, was it cattle or what?
Mostly cattle and some sheep.
Yeah.
My stepdad ran a lot of cattle, and he had about 500 ewes.
And
all fine wools.
Did you work on that then before dogs?
Yeah, I was the dog.
So you had stock sense. You grew up with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I'd get in trouble if I chased the sheep too much.
Oh yeah. So you got to have your dogs working nice.
I had to work nice.
Oh yeah. And so
no dog.
Oh yeah, you had to work nice. Well, that's the best way to get stock sense. Yeah, the hard way.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, when you got interested in dogs, where did you go? Like, I got a book. I started with a book. How did you start to get informed about how to work them?
My stepdad was good with the dogs,
Yeah.
and he'd used them a long time, and he used to trial like back in the 70s, like with the old timers in this country. He'd trial a bit, and he bought dogs from Arthur Allen, who imported a bunch from Great Britain.
Yes.
A lot of the good old lines.
Yes.
And so he got me going, and I went to a few clinics to watch, and Patrick Shanahan clinics, a couple of those, and then I just kind of learned along the way myself.
Yeah. And is there anybody, like I've seen the way you handle, and is there anybody who you think influenced the way you like to work dogs?
I think a lot of what I'm influenced by is I want to see stock handled properly, because I've really grown up with raising livestock for, that's the livelihood. And so any stock handled incorrectly is really bad.
Yeah.
It affects the income.
Yeah.
And so that's when I train, the dogs have to handle the stock properly. That's number one. And that's how I work cattle, sheep, whatever it is. So that's my goal on handling.
Yeah. I hear a lot of Welsh boys talking about, with fat sheep, in the summer, not to run the fat off them and treat them real nice. And I see that's the way you kind of work. I mean, if I was to describe how you ran today, I really enjoyed it because everything just seemed to flow along effortlessly.
Oh, thank you.
And I saw a lot of dogs, and I only saw a couple of people like that worked the way you did. And do you think? I don't know. Do you think? When I look at the way you work, it's like you've got the sheep hypnotized. Can you describe what's happening there? What you're thinking or what you're trying to do?
Well, I try to train my dogs in such a way that they are responsible for the sheep. And so when I'm one of my more broke dogs, when I'm running them, I want them handling the sheep for the most part. So I give the dog more responsibility. And I try to never I don't want too much distance to develop, and I want the dog to always be influencing what the sheep are thinking about doing. And so if I let too much distance develop, the sheep are going to be like, oh, we can go somewhere. Whereas if the dog is always slightly moving them, they're thinking about that instead of leaving. Whereas if the dog, pushes on them too hard, then that's really going to make them want to leave. But it's kind of that balance that you can't always achieve it, but that's my goal.
And so I was talking to Michael Gallagher in Ireland, that you've probably heard of him. He's been over here a bit. And I was talking to him last week, but I was talking about that distance, and how do you know where that distance is? Like, I tell you where I think I could see it today sometimes at the pen, when people they'd start penning and their dog needs to come in 2 more yards, but they didn't seem to notice it. And it looked like the sheep were going in, and the sheep say, "Wait there's no dog here," and they just wheel around back out again. But how do you find where that distance is, or is it different with different dogs? Or
Yeah, it's different with different dogs and different sheep. I find the same thing when I'm riding my horse working cattle. Certain cattle I need to be closer or farther to handle them properly. And it's all about, like, when the sheep come around the post, I'm reading them as far as how they're responding to the dog. And then, you know, hopefully the dog is responding correctly, mostly on its own. But like at the pen, I'm watching every little response from the sheep and reading them, so that I try to not react to what they do. I try to act like as they're doing it, so that they don't commit to, you know, leaving or something like that. Does that make sense?
It sounds like a very tricky balance. That's why I keep kind of teasing you about this one. I'm trying to understand it, because it sounds to me like what you're saying is that you let the dog work, you give the dog lots of responsibility. But like I see lots of other people here letting the dog work, and that's not good. Like, and so how do you know when to step in and when to back off? And it's nearly like you're feeling the thing. Like you say, when you turn the post, you see how the sheep are reacting. Are you feeling it as you go around, or how do you know?
Pretty much all the time.
And I'm afraid you're going to say to me, look at Paddy, it comes down to years of experience with stock. I suppose, like for somebody who's trying to learn that or trying to find out what you mean, what's the best way for, not even a beginner, but you know, somebody sort of middle of the road there like me, who, you know, can get around, but to bring the game up that little bit?
I'd say you're much better the middle of the road.
Yeah, well, I bluff well. But, well, for example, though, somebody, you know, that's a kind of a good, like we say here, like good open handler, but just is not going to threaten up at that sort of next level.
Well,
How could, put it this way, what could they start to do that would put you under pressure out there on it?
I think a lot of people don't read stock correctly, and they're not experienced with stock, and I think they don't respect the stock enough.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think, like for me, when I give people lessons, of course it drives me crazy if they chase my sheep around. That gets quit real quickly. But a lot of the greener people, they probably hate me, but I make them tie up their dog, and I put little cones in not a very big area, kind of a corral deal, and I make them move the sheep around by themselves, watching the sheep. And then once they kind of get them around this little obstacle thing, then I say, okay, tell me which one was the leader, which one was most pressure sensitive. Like, I'm trying to make them read the stock, because that's really what it boils down to.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. And that's something we can all practice. I think I grew up a little bit like you, where I was moving stock with no dog, and I had some brothers shouting at me, get over there, move in, get out, do this, do that. And so that's kind of like that cone part that we all have to do sooner or later.
Or like when I was young and I'd be bored, which you are when you're a kid, if the sheep were like in a corner, I'd see if I could walk one out and see how far I could walk one away from the others. Myself on foot, no dogs. And then pretty soon they want to get back to the group. But if I tried to step over and block it, they beat you.
Yeah.
But if you turn around and walk towards the other sheep, they stop.
Yeah.
Little stuff like that. And like little deals like that, that really helps you, like with sorting.
Yeah, yeah. And so when you're giving clinics, is there one bit of advice that kind of you find that you have to give over and over again to people?
Well, it's really hard. It's like there's a lot of feel involved with training and working, and that's the hardest thing to explain to people.
Yeah, yeah, because I see a lot of people that come from obedience and agility, and they really get, you know, they're good trainers. But I don't know how you convey that other bit that you're talking about.
It's like when to apply more pressure to the dog, when to take it off. And it's the same thing with the sheep. You know, it's like certain sheep, if they look in the pen, you back off a little bit, and that makes looking in pleasant.
Yeah.
Whereas other ones, you better take that chance and get them in.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the thing I love about talking to handlers like you is I come away with more questions than you've answered, and you get me thinking, and like that little bit that we're just talking about, there's an awful lot in that. And Is there any, like sometimes I'm talking to handlers, there's one piece of advice that was kind of fundamental to them that always sticks out to them. Is there anything that anyone ever said to you that you kind of really, little law or something? I suppose you're at it since you were so young, it's probably lost now, but is there anything like that that sticks out that you think is?
Well, I think for trial people, a lot of, especially people coming up, that they really try to rush things more than they should, and they try to push their dog too fast and bump them up to open too quickly or run them too hard in nursery, you know, that kind of thing. And I've seen a lot of dogs kind of ruined that way. And the people aren't having fun either, you know, they're not having success. And they need to really focus on that foundation.
It's funny, that must be a universal thing, because I see that a lot in nurseries, and people get hung up on winning nurseries. And if they got a good dog, that nurseries are relevant. We're not going to remember who won what.
Yeah.
Instead of focusing on maybe making a really good dog for themselves and just back off of it in the short term. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course if one's no good, he's no good.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. But
Right.
it's hard to watch a good dog get spoiled just
Yeah.
for somebody in a bit of a panic, say a few months or a year.
Totally.
Let's see that now. You always seem so calm, and even when I talk to you, because when I talk and I get excited about something, I start to panic a bit and everything speeds up and all. And maybe I hunt a little bit the same, but you always seem to be in a nice, consistent, relaxed way. But when you go out to the stake, you look relaxed and in control. What's in your head as you go out to the stake? Well, I know you, and when you lift the sheep and when you're coming down the field and you're reading and you're calculating all that, but before it all starts and you're going out with your dog, what are you thinking about?
I have a plan. You know, I watch a little bit and see how runs are going and what the sheep are doing. So I have a plan, and then a plan B and a plan C, and kind of down. And then I think if I kind of go through different scenarios and how I would handle things, and then of course things don't always go the way you'd like them to.
Yeah.
And so I think having things planned out helps me stay calm, because I'm not going to run into something in the moment that I haven't thought of. And of course it happens, but you can lessen it to a degree.
Yeah. And where we are, I'm always thinking about the international. You know, that's always the big thing every year, the big event. Over here, what are the big things for you, or what are trials that you want to be involved in, or ideally, you know, that you'd like to win as a handler over here in the US?
The national finals, that's our big thing. It would kind of be like your international.
Yeah. And that's the thing you're kind of working up to all the time?
I think pretty much all the open handlers,
Yeah.
that's their goal. There's some big trials over here like Meeker, the Bluegrass, Soldier Hollow. Those are all big trials with big payout
Yeah.
that everybody'd like to win, but the national finals is a nice title.
Yes, and it's a nice one when you, well, like all these titles, when you get them, you have them.
Yeah.
And so there seems to be a big variation in sheep. So we're talking about wool-blind sheep, and then I hear a lot about range sheep, and then we had these commercial sheep today, which were quite nice, I thought. But what kind of qualities are you going to need in it? What kind of qualities you think you want for a dog that hopefully you can make it the whole way with?
Yeah, range ewes are a little bit tricky to work, because being that a lot of them are slightly wool blind, and they're very, you could probably classify them as feral kind of sheep. They're all in bands. That's how they're managed. And a band is 1,000. I don't know if you guys have that same system. No. And so most of them are lambed outside, so they're never worked in small groups. And so when you get them in a small group, you know, 4 or 5, whatever the trial is, they really want to escape.
Yeah.
And so, and like these, you know, like you flank over a little bit, they turn, because they can see behind them really well. Like, you know, a little flank, they move. Well, the range ewes, they decide they're going to run somewhere, and you got to like come all the way over here and catch them to catch their eye. Like, you got to get farther forward on those for them to see, and then they're going to shoot off another way, and that's where you really need clean reverse flanks.
Yes.
So you got to be like hauling this way, and then as soon as they turn, you better have a clean reverse, like no stop in between. Whip over here and catch them here, and that can line them out.
Oh yeah.
Whereas like these kind of sheep, they respond totally different. You don't need that type thing.
And can one dog do it all, or do you need a certain kind of dog if you're going to be trialing on range sheep a lot?
A good dog can do everything.
That's what I was hoping you'd say. Yeah, that's really good.
The range ewes, they don't like a dog with a lot of eye.
I hear that.
Yeah, a dog that's a little bit more upright, a little freer moving, they're not as threatened by. And I think that's because, they're out on the range, hence range ewes. And so like coyotes,
Stalking
they
them.
sneak up on them, and so I think they're extra threatened by that.
And if your dog has got a lot of eye, can you compensate it by working it out wider, or it's like you say with clean flanks? Will that help you?
Yeah, you can't work range ewes too far away either. They're a real tricky balance. In my opinion, they're the hardest ones to work.
Yeah.
Because they shoot off, and then the next thing they do is they whip around and fight.
Yeah.
Like, you can't catch their eye too many times, or else pretty soon they're going to stop and they're going to kaboom on your dog.
Yeah, it's over then, no matter.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But if you do have a dog with a lot of eye, you need to have them really clean about letting go of that eye when you ask them to.
Yeah. And so when you say like really clean about letting it go, like on a flank that he turns his head out and,
Exactly.
and he keeps nice and clean around it. And when you reverse him, then that he's on that same
He better
distance and balance.
follow his same tracks back.
Yeah. Ah, really good. But it sounds like range ewes, they'd be good for any of us to train on, really, because our dogs would have to work correctly. If we could work range ewes, we'd have our dog trained well.
Yeah, there's a lot of dogs, they're just not strong enough for them,
Yeah.
number one. Like those range ewes, they're going to whip around and look at them.
Yeah.
And a dog that stops, even for a minute, like it builds the sheep up. Whereas one that just walks in like calm, the sheep, most of the time they'll just turn around and move.
Yeah. Oh yeah, so if a dog hesitates, he's kind of done, like he just needs to be good and straight up about it, and he'd be okay then.
Yeah, and that'll really sort dogs out.
Yeah.
And I always buy cull range ewes to train on, especially young dogs, because I want to see young what they're going to do when those ewes put that kind of pressure.
Yeah.
And I just go to the sale barn, buy fresh ones, and when they get broke, I sell them.
Yeah.
Because once they're broke, they're more like normal sheep.
Well, I think we should all do that. Even I was saying that to a friend of mine, his sheep are really dog broken. I said, look, you just need to buy sheep 2 months and sell them. If you lose a few pounds, what about it? You're getting good training sheep.
Exactly.
Like.
Yeah, that's what I do, because like buying yearlings are way too expensive. I mean, they're like $320 a head.
Yeah.
But the culls I can buy anywhere from like 90 to 130 a head. So I
Yeah.
always have about 20 of those.
And they're not going to depreciate too much either, I expect.
No, they're pretty good.
And so this weekend here, I don't want to forget, you sort of cleaned up there. You won everything on everybody. I'd say they won't want to see you back here for a while. But it was a good weekend, and hold on for a second there. Oh, yeah, I hope we didn't have you out there for too long. You were on the edge a little bit.
Oh.
But do you enjoy your weekend up here in Oregon?
Oh, very much.
Yeah.
When I used to live closer, I'd hit all these Oregon trials because I really enjoy these sheep.
Yeah.
Now where I live, I'm all down like range ewes or hair sheep, which are
Yes.
totally different. But I made an effort to get back up here this time because
Yeah, well,
I really do enjoy these sheep.
You really adapted to it well now, and
Thank you.
what I love today is there were 3 really good runs today, or yesterday it was actually. I'm getting mixed up. Yeah, yesterday there was 3 really good runs, and it was nice because Maggie McClure ran in the morning, and then you run in the afternoon, and then we had another run in the evening, and they were all top runs, and it just showed people that despite some less than good runs, it was always possible to put up a good run if your dog was trained correctly, like, and if you could work your dog well. So that was very nice to see. But and so you've got to drive all the way home back down to Nevada, and so listen. But thanks very much for hanging around to talk to us.
Oh, I appreciate this.
Yeah. And
very much.
yeah, because like you have a long drive ahead now, and it's been great to talk to you. So thanks very much, and
Thank
really
you very
good to meet
much.
you.
Yeah, really nice to meet you too.